So I have a collection of about maybe 800 photographs of African Americans from the beginning of photography till about late 50s, early 60s. Some of the types of photographs that I like to work from, these are cabinet cards. And I began with an interest in my grandmother's photo albums and the images that she had of my ancestors and the stories that she told about them. I was told that when I was a toddler, I drew on the walls all the time. And my parents didn't discourage me from doing it. Apparently, they just washed the walls down. I grew up and I went to art school, and I was working mostly on paper and painting on canvas. And back in 1993, I went to this beautiful villa in Italy, outside of Milan. And there, I made my first wall drawings as a profession. The villa had been a slave trader's home.
Outside of Rome?
Yeah. This slave trader dealt in Africans taken from Brazil well into the 20th century. So I did these drawings in homage of the people who had been in that house. I went there with the intention of making, works on paper, and then after learning the history of the house, I just had to somehow address that. And so it brought me back to working on the walls. This is my installation called Whispers from the Walls, which I created in Denton, Texas in 1999. I researched the city of Denton, and I learned about African-American settlement that was actually very prosperous between the 1880s and the 1920s. But in the 1920s, the residents were forced to leave to make way for a city park in the center of town. And so I created this installation in honor of the residents of Quakertown. I worked with the students at the University of North Texas. I had 3 classes of students who helped build the house. We tore wood from old houses. We also bought some lumber from the salvage yards. And while they were building it, I was out shopping, my favorite thing. Shopping for the items the antique items to furnish the room. The images of the people on the walls are from a photo archive in Dallas, which is about a 25-minute drive from Denton. And I spent a day there looking through about 2,000 photographs. From those 2,000 photographs, I chose about maybe 100 images. And I should say that the cabin was fashioned after my great-aunt Fanny's house, who lived in South Carolina and lived to be 105. You know, with the studio portraits that I work from, which are very posed and, often full-figure images, I love that. I love doing that. But I began to notice how different these small ID photos are. These are photo booth images that people take because they wanted to immortalize themselves. This was before everyone had their own camera. And I also started looking at mugshots. The difference with the mugshots and the ID photos is that people are not being photographed for vanity or because they want to immortalize themselves. They're being photographed because they have to. And sometimes it's not a good moment for them. I found this image of this young man, and I was so struck by something in his eyes, an emotion, and that I wanted to capture that. And without realizing that I would do a series of 60 kin pieces, I worked on this drawing. And then, as I usually do, somehow I start looking around and objects in the room start to call out to me, you know, like these flags were saying, put me over there. So I put the flags there, and it led to the kin series. This is called Chalvet Chauvin. This is also at the Whitney Museum. I just want to mention that I learned a lot with this one in particular because I had a floral wreath which I intended to place on this drawing. And it somehow made him so soft, almost effeminate in a way. It brought out his soft side, let's put it that way. And then when I placed the bullets there, it brought out something so much more mysterious and haunting, you know. And he still has that soft, gentle face, but there's something else lurking. I think that says much more about life and about society. 1619, that was the year that the first Africans were brought over to the U.S. Last year, I was brought down here to talk about doing a project. I really enjoy going to other cities and locations and learning about the city or learning about the location and then thinking of some way of, or some story, just something that interests me to create an artwork on. Before coming here, all I really knew was the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. And so I was taken around by Nandini and some other people to various historical places. I went to the Bessie Museum. I went to the History Museum over by the aquarium, where I met with Mr. Black, and I met with Mr. White, who took me up to Lookout Point. And it was interesting because a lot of, I remember Mr. White saying to me, you see where those condos are over there? That's where the black neighborhood was. And then at the Bessie Museum, people would say, you see that parking lot over there? That's where the speakeasy was, where Bessie Smith performed. And so there were a lot of things that I had to imagine, although they weren't there anymore, sure. But I think it was Mr. Black at the History Museum who mentioned Camp Contraband. And that was the first I had heard of it. The image and the idea of the water and the river and freedom being at the other side. It was so intriguing that you know, I was having dreams about it. I had always wanted to combine video with my installations, and I spent 8 8 sessions going to various rivers and just sitting there and filming the water. It's like watching an abstract movie when you get it onto the computer. But when you're there and it's just like, you know, it's like fishing. You just sort of relax and let the waves move around and you take the footage. But when I got it home, I was just so thrilled at the sparkles and the lines and the way that the light came in bursts and then disappeared. And there was something about that song, Deep River. There was something about that when I first noticed it, it was about 10 years ago or something. I had a Marian Anderson recording, and I heard it, and I knew I was going to use that in an installation. And so hearing about the campground at the other side of the river, it was like, you know, this was meant to be. And I got a good friend who is a trained opera singer to make an a cappella version of it specifically for the show. And I did a lot of reading. There was a lot of bittersweet things, you know. It certainly was not that the camp was welcoming these people with open arms, like, come to us and we'll save you. I mean, these people were just coming, and they realized that they had to do something with them, and so this is what they did. They put them to work. Sometimes they were paid, sometimes they weren't. Probably most of the time they weren't. But you know, I read a lot of things that that really touched me in terms of the things that those people had to go through back then. Small and large challenges that sort of make swimming across the river seem like, you know, easy, you know, compared to some of the other things they had to deal with. And I wanted everything to be symbolic. So I was not worried about, you know, finding period pieces or being historically accurate with the objects I used. And also, you know, with the people I chose to draw on these discs, each one was a really special experience for me. Whenever I'm working, the act of drawing a head or drawing a person, particularly a person from the past, I mean, I'm always thinking about this photograph I'm holding in my hand is possibly the only image of this person left on the planet, and it's something that I feel honored to be able to pay homage to them. And so it's always an experience. And I also should say that I used images of people from different periods for several reasons, but I didn't want to feel that this was only about camp contraband here in Chattanooga. I wanted it to be about the issue of striving for freedom, you know, like how difficult freedom was for them to achieve, and how we're still fighting for freedom.